from Electrocraft.
This is Room Tone, and my name is William Garrett. The room tone for this chat comes from New York City. Electrocraft East, my studio in Midtown Manhattan, in the shadow of the Empire State Building. Altering the room tone is the voice of singer-songwriter Sasha Dobson. Sasha comes from a California family steeped in jazz traditions. Moving to NYC at 17, she has grown and transitioned into her own distinct artist with 3 full albums and 2 EPs, including the just-released EP, Into the Trees. She has toured extensively with our friend Norah Jones and also as a solo artist, most recently warming up the crowds for the legendary Wilie Nelson. Sasha graciously agreed to be the first interview in my Room Tone series, and she made it easy for me with her ease in conversation, her great story, and her fantastic sense of humor. Great to have you here, Sasha, after us talking about doing this for a long time.
Great to be here.
The first thing I want to ask you is, a lot is made in your press about your musical upbringing, and tell me about growing up with parents that were working jazz musicians. I mean, I have this notion of a crazy creative house with music being played, 24/7. Was that what it was like?
There was a lot of that. The happiest moments, and even to this day, the happiest I am is when I'm surrounded by musicians, and there's food, and there, people are, like you were saying earlier, playing for no good reason.
Right.
That to me,
playing for the joy of playing music.
For the joy. Yeah. I mean, that's probably the most fruitful thing and the luckiest thing I had growing up, aside from great parents and a functional family life, which is a blessing, obviously. But that part, as an adult, I can see how special that was.
How old were you when you decided to sort of join in and start making music?
So young. I mean, at the time, it seemed like I was like, I'm ready. You guys, let me in the band. But, I think I was only about 4 or 5. But, when you're a kid, it's like my brother started playing when he was so young. He literally crawled, the typical story, he literally crawled on the drum set in his diapers. Uppy, uppy, uppy. And that, he's been serious about music, but, he's been like a phenomenal drummer ever since. Or growing up that way and playing with my dad, So probably it started out a little bit just sibling rivalry and like jealousy and seeing how, I saw how bright it was for my brother to share that with my parents. So I think I wanted in pretty early.
What was your sort of, I always call it your gotta dance moment, where you realized that this is kind of what you wanted to do, that you wanted to perform, that you felt like you could perform, when did that happen and where did that motivation come from?
Such a funny question, because then it puts me back to like being a toddler. I mean,
so really that far back? I
guess so. My mother, because my parents predominantly played gigs for money and taught a little, but not that much. I mean, so my mother sang gigs until she was after 9 months pregnant with me. But, I think my parents brought us along as much as they could functionally, and fortunately it exposed us to, we took a liking to it. I definitely... I'm very shy, even though I'm kind of an extrovert and a silly person, like especially on stage. I'm the most shy. But there is, it's like a longing. I can't really quite explain it. Why do we do what we do, especially if it isn't obvious, like, gotta die,
When did you kind of go solo? Because you were performing with your family, and then when did you make the move to...
I quit the band when I was 10.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. So I have no idea why my parents said yes to this, but I managed to conjure my way out of high school and Santa Cruz and moved to New York when I was 17, which is crazy now because I'm a lot older than that. And at the time, it seemed like I was really ready, and I guess I was. I'm still here. But that was really young.
Yeah, what was it like for you coming to New York at that age? And did you actually, start
Terrifying.
knocking on doors and trying to get gigs and that sort of thing?
Well, I came to New York. My way in at that age, and financially, the way that we could all afford it was financial aid. I went to the New School for about a year and a half, and that's where I met some of my first best friends and musicians, and immediately started gigging with them around town here and there. I fortunately had my foot in the door with a couple of musicians that I knew my dad. Eventually, I started meeting people that knew my dad. That was definitely, I didn't know anyone when I moved here because I was a kid, but it made it easy to get my foot, at least psychologically, for being kind of a shy person, at first. I know it's hard to believe, but but yeah, I think that was helpful back then, especially when I moved to New York. All I wanted to do was sing jazz. It was the most motivated I've ever been about anything, except for playing the guitar and writing, was to pursue. And because my mother was such a great jazz singer and my father was so revered, I needed to move away to kind of develop more of myself as a jazz singer, at least in my mind. That was for sure what I was going to do.
Well, let's talk about the process of you sort of transitioning the music you're doing from jazz to what are we calling what you're doing now?
I guess it's pop, rock.
Yeah,
I mean, I definitely am listening to more punk rock these days, or, at least my punk rock friends would probably say that I'm listening to more rock or whatever
soft
the hell, soft punk. I mean, I love more punk rock songwriters like Elliott Smith, people who are a little grimier, a little bit tougher. I like downstrokes, you know what I mean? Like, physically speaking, I like that pulse, and I like lyrics that are raw. So I go for, I tend to, I don't know, it's funny. I guess in some ways jazz is kind of punk rock in its aggression, and the way that things are sung and said. So even though the feel is different, it's like kind of a similar energy. Folk music, which I love and which I'm involved with indirectly through a lot of the musicians I work with, even though I love some of the old classic folk and, the songwriters that they influence all of us. It's not necessarily music that I run home to turn on.
Right, right. Well, that leads to my next question, which is, was it a conscious decision to explore other styles than jazz, or was it just an instinctive and gradual move into other genres?
I think it was just social. I got a little burnt out on the scene, and, things shifted after the big accident. My dad died in a car accident, and things shifted all over the place. Not just, I don't want to sing jazz anymore. It took a long time, but I think maybe a good 5 years after that, I think it was just a matter of going, here's what really happened, if you want to know. I went on a date, believe it or not, and this guy took me to the living room. This is so true. Can't believe I should have remembered this a long time ago, and I just remember thinking, I'd spent most of my young adulthood hanging out in jazz clubs where people 2-3 times my age would go, and that's where I felt comfortable, is hanging out with people much older than me and just being in an atmosphere where people who like jazz music, it's generally that kind of, not people my age, never, So I just remember going in the living room and thinking, oh my God, totally nervous to be hanging out in a club with young people.
That's so funny.
I know, I'm socially retarded.
With people your own age. That's very funny.
I'm such a weirdo. I blame my parents. No. Anyways, that's what you had to look forward to.
Do you remember who was playing?
Yes. It was Jim Campolongo, and it was back when he had Dan Reeser and Tim Lunsell.
This is
my old band.
This is part of your current,
it's kind of special
current crew. I
because
know,
all
amazing.
Those guys ended up being some of my best friends.
Exactly.
But it churned something in my brain that I never could shake. And it's funny because that night, I didn't meet him that night, but I remember Richard Julian was also there that night. And I just thought, who the fuck is this guy? With the glasses.
Was he playing or just
No,
there?
he was just looming with a margarita in his hand and the glass. That's back in the day when he had the little glasses and And I just thought, who's that guy? And these people are quirky and cool.
But that's amazing. You basically walked into the group that would become your future musical compatriots. So that's an amazing story.
It changed my life that night.
Right. What happened to the guy?
Nothing. Nothing. I don't know. I don't know.
You're not going to.
We hung out a few more times, and anyway.
Well, that's amazing. That is amazing that you were introduced into a social scene that ended up forming where your music goes, because these people are all playing with you and contributing, and all those people you mentioned are phenomenal musicians, so their contributions are amazing. So I think it really is interesting that you move in a social group that turns out to be your musical group as well, and then it makes for new and exciting stuff. Yeah,
it's good to remember, like, every day can be magical. Or not.
Or not.
But I remember thinking, actually, this conversation is reminding me, like, oh, wow, he came from jazz, and he's playing music that's great. And I really, it kind of, like, opened something up in my brain, like, I didn't expect it.
Do you have a specific creative process, like when you go to write, or you dim the lights, or smoke something?
I roll a joint.
No.
I wish that I could say I do. I definitely used to, take a little puff off the pipe or whatever. The green pipe, that is.
That's right.
Hello. But these days, now that I'm a bit older and a lot more stressed out for good reason, it's like I would like to be more methodical. At this point, I'm just writing down. My creative process is more like all day long. Like any chance I get or any idea I get, which is normally like on the train, in the shower, when I'm walking,
So it's continuous sort of observation and thought that you've figured out a pattern that you can write things down or keep a journal or do something that keeps those ideas in the forefront.
Yeah, it's kind of happening all the time. It's a little bit of a bittersweet, the songwriting thing, it's like a whole other level of responsibility that I'm still kind of like growing into. It's a little bit love-hate because I know it's something I have to do. I've already like clarified that with my psychic self, but it's like, it's emotionally draining and it's time-consuming, and it's also it's something that unless you're ready to work on with another person, it's the only way is to do it alone. It means solitude, and it also means being organized, and it's like a whole other thing that I took on, not really realizing what I was doing. I totally don't regret it. It's amazing. It's totally opened up my whole world, and I wish that I had gone to school for songwriting, just like I didn't go to school for music. You learn these things through osmosis.
Well, in my world, that's the way you always learned it. There was no school for songwriting. There was no school for recording engineering except being the T-boy at the recording studio.
Sure,
I always sort of laugh when people say they went to songwriting school. I'm like, oh, really?
Yeah. Well, that makes you feel a little
how's
better.
How's that working for you?
Right on.
It's
that's the thing. Maybe the work that we do is so like ethereal, or it has a lot to some people. Richard Julian, who's one of the first songwriters I got to really spend a lot of time with, is a very different kind of writer. He's a very cerebral and super wicked smart, and taps into his intellect. I'm way more right brain in the way that I write and the way that I am, and so it's more of an emotional roller coaster.
What motivates you to keep doing all this, to keep writing, to keep playing? You've had some great, brushes with the big time touring and, hanging out with Wilie Nelson. And
we didn't hang out in the way I wanted to.
Right.
I wish.
You didn't get to go in the...
We didn't smoke pot or make out or anything. No.
Darn, that's
just
good.
Kidding. No.
But, do you feel like busy. Sort of back to the gotta dance moment, do you feel like this is just what you have to do and you'll do it hell or high water?
What was the question?
I'm always fascinated by the motivation for people that they stick to it, because we all know this is not the greatest
time.
Well, the payoff sometime is long in coming and has to be measured in a lot of small steps. And I know some people who, probably shouldn't keep going, because they're actually not that good, and you
Right.
kind of want to pat them on the back and say, that's okay. But then there are other people that I think are amazing that aren't instantly shuttled into the top
Stardom,
10.
right? Sure.
So it's I find it interesting that people keep going, and you've continued on, not only continued on, but you've evolved all on the way in a super creative and artistic way. So that's even
Thanks,
more.
Will.
That's even more fascinating to me that you keep plugging away at it.
Well, yeah. I mean, the honest truth is that I've thought about it. I think about it every day. Honestly, I don't know what else to do. It's like I keep thinking there's something else I can fall back on when this doesn't work out. But it just is, it's who I am to the core. So probably the sooner I stop thinking that way, maybe the more I can be productive. I don't know.
Well, I think one of the things that keeps us all involved is that we don't believe in the fallback theory.
Yeah.
I remember,
it doesn't really exist.
It's sort of if you don't have anything to fall back on, then you'll have to make it in whatever part of music you've chosen, and then you have to come to a point where your success is playing a gig, even if there are 3 people there, and then
right.
Luckily for you play a gig 2 weeks later where there a bunch of people there, so you've at least got.
Little bit of both.
Yeah, a little bit of both, exactly.
I know, it's bittersweet.
It's definitely bittersweet.
It's like, but it's funny. Sometimes, playing for Wilie was a complete honor. So that was great. But then, it's sometimes, like the other day, my birthday fell on a Monday, and I play at a very small little place in Williamsburg when I'm in town every Monday. And sometimes, just the feeling of connecting with one person, or just, I don't know, the feelings of playing music. I don't know. There's plenty of joy to go around. It doesn't necessarily come from like being on the big stage.
Tell me about the new EP, Into the Trees.
Well, one of the best things that happened with the record I made last year, Aquarius, is that I fell along the path with producer Joel Hamilton, who has become a friend and collaborator. He owns Studio G, the recording studio in Williamsburg, or
It was really
Greenpoint.
nice of them to name it after me.
Yes,
Studio
yes.
G, I appreciate
Studio
that.
William Garrett G
exactly,
in the house.
Really
Yeah.
appreciate that.
And probably, spiritually has saved my life a little bit in the last year, just having someone to work with on a fairly steady basis. This year maybe a little bit less because he's getting super busy again. But we made Into the Trees, which is basically like an in-between project.
Aquarius had not been out that long before this came out, right?
Yeah.
About a year in between or less?
Definitely less. We probably finished the record a solid year in between, at least. One thing that I feel really safe about working with Joel is that he understands my singing, in that in that where I am now and where I'm coming from. It's not just that he's connected to the music I'm making now. He fully understands the music I used to make, and so a lot of the music on Into the Trees is sort of like an exploration of that. It's a little bit paying tribute to the different hats that I wear. It isn't necessarily, to me, I thought, well, are we really going to put this out? It's like, a little bit scatterbrained because it's not one style.
I did notice that when I listened to it, that
it's all over.
The Forest has this real 80s feel, and then the other song, The Fix has sort of the big rock guitar chorus and stuff like that. And I love the opening track, Big Louise. That's
right
amazing. It's really a knockout track. It sounds amazing.
Oh, I'm so glad you like it. Yeah.
What other things outside music do you pursue that sort of keep your creativity going?
Well,
film, art, this, that.
One thing I'd like to do is go back to dance class really bad. But
I know you're way into yoga.
I'm really into yoga.
And does that have any connection to your creativity in terms of clearing out brain space and all that sort of thing?
I need to go to yoga. No. It's very true. I don't talk about it that much because, everybody thinks you're, you know,
Well,
a wishy-washy, new agey
you're from California
stone
and
collector,
all, so
which
you
I
have to be
am.
careful.
I do collect stones, and I am new agey.
Okay.
No.
Newsflash.
Stack stones.
Yeah.
No, but it changed my life. I mean, it really did give me a different source of energy and like tap into a different. It definitely, you're making space for sure.
Right.
Physical health in general, like any artist or any person that uses their body, you know, your health is your wealth for any human.
I know you've got some other projects going on.
Yeah.
Tell me what's next and what's happening.
So the other things, definitely one thing that's helped songwriting and musicianship has this side project. I have two side projects, but one in particular is Puss in Boots, which is a girl band that I have with Norah Jones, and we've had two bands together. The first one was the Sloppy Joannes, and this second one, Puss in Boots, is with Catherine Popper, who's a great bassist, and it's been a kind of not a joke. But it's been more of like a way for us all to come together locally when we're all in town and fuck around on new songs or covers. And in the meantime, get more comfortable on guitar or whatever. I mean, we've expanded in the last year or so by, you know, I've been getting on the drums and, you know, Catherine started writing recently in the last year. So it's a supportive environment. You know?
And you've just done a record with Puss in Boots.
And so
right?
we finally recorded. We recorded our set by default at my CD release at the Bell House last year. So then we were like, well, man, it's time. We need to do this. It's been years that we've been together. So we booked something with Joel and, made a record in like 2 days.
Brilliant.
Yeah. And so then Norah was kind enough to bring it to a few people at Blue Note, I think because she thought that maybe we could get into like a subdivision, and Blue Note took it on.
Fantastic.
I know, it's so funny. All these years later, 17, I moved to New York to get signed to Blue Note to sing jazz. And like, you know, 17 years later, I'm signed to Blue Note playing drums and guitar on a country record. It's fucking insane.
It's brilliant.
I'll take it.
It's totally.
No, it's totally amazing.
Brilliant.
And it isn't just a country band. Certainly we all, some of the stuff that we do is pretty jazzy, West Coast swing. I mean, it's because the guitar and because of the instruments that we choose, it has, and because there's harmony, it's easy to turn it into the country thing. But it is very, we do all different kinds of stuff.
Well, it was amazing to have a chance to talk to you about all this stuff and to dig in a little bit to where it all comes from.
Super fun. Thanks for
really
having
cool.
me.
Okay, well, Sasha Dobson, everybody.
Bye.
For more info on Sasha, go to sasha-dobson.squarespace.com. For more info on Puss in Boots, go to bluenote.com. For more information on Roomtone, go to roomtoneradio.com. Remember, an interesting conversation beats talking to yourself. See you next time.
She stands all alone. You can hear her hum softly from her fire escape in the sky.